welcome to Famous When I'm Dead, a podcast where professional artists hand you the tools so you can thrive while you're still alive. I'm your host, Sam King Davis. I'm an artist, designer, teacher, and creative entrepreneur. I'm also a recovered alcoholic addict, and I have ADHD. If you can relate to that, or you are creative on the fringes in any way, in this segment, I'm calling now Redefining the Box. Sounds fancy, right? I'm calling this Redefining the Box, and I'll introduce you to successful creators who do not fit into the typical definition of average. If you have any questions for me or guests, you can email us at famouswhenimdead@kingdavisart.com. If you want to stay up to date with upcoming episodes, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find those along with all of the show notes in the description below. So, this is my first time meeting you. I heard you on Andy's podcast. So I want to introduce everyone to a 3D topographical boss, Noah Camp.
Thanks. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah. So, I heard about I heard about Andy. Maybe I heard him interviewing on an ADHD podcast. Then I interviewed him and listened to the Creative Pep Talk. And one of the first episodes he interviewed you, or the one that I listened to, he interviewed you. And I think I'm set up already to interview like other people that he's interviewed, or other people that are like in connection with CoLoop and stuff, because I find it really inspiring and fascinating. You're working with CoLoop, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, like having a different kind of agency. You know, we're kind of defining what agencies can be. So it's been really cool.
So you guys, is it arranged in a way that's like you have Ryan, who's like he's like the agent, the organized one, and then the rest of you guys just share clients?
I wouldn't say we necessarily share clients, but it is about trying to perpetuate the kind of work with this artist. So yeah, it'd be perfect if you worked with that artist. But Ryan is the organized one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the structure right now, is that Ryan is the agent, but he's also the co-owner. So
Okay, cool. Yeah, I need an organized one in my life, I think.
Stand.
So I do want to talk just a little bit about the redefining the box, or being on the fringes. I don't want to make any assumptions or anything, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about how, maybe you can talk about that, or kind of take the ball on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I first started, I was teaching myself how to do calligraphy and how to draw and how to get into 3D. And I was really doing it alone. And while I was doing that, I had gotten sober a few years before. And I also discovered through sobriety that I was trans. And this is in my 30s that I realized that my gender didn't match up. So
can I ask you a question about that? So, was there always kind of something in the background that you were ignoring, or was it something that just kind of came to the surface pretty quickly after you sobered up?
It was actually really surprising to me that I didn't realize it sooner, and that I really didn't have many signs along the way, except for when I was really, really little, and kind of blocked that out. It didn't come to the surface right when I got sober. A lot of things came to the surface when I got sober, but that one was needed a lot more of the other stuff getting out of the way before I could see it, pretty much. That's kind of how I see it, is that there were a number of things that came to the surface and they all came in their own time. And the realizing that I was transgender was a little bit late on the train. It was like my last big revelation. And then there might be another revelation, coming up. But yeah, that it wasn't really something that I could figure out if I had been blocking or, it's just too complicated. It has too many factors to know what my brain was doing about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, part of the reason I wanted to bring it up is because I'm pretty open-minded and curious. But even with my curiosity, I kind of am naive about a lot of it. I have friends who are transgender and gay and bi and all of that, but I have to give credit actually to my wife for like explaining a lot of this stuff to me, because I'm just, I have all these questions, and some things make sense, some things don't make sense, and she kind of is the voice of reason and kind of makes sense of it. And one of the things that she said was that because there's an artist that I'm going to interview that on the Instagram page it says non-binary queer, and I didn't understand why that would just be right on the front page.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that it's about allies, having an ally. So that's like one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up in this podcast, because I think it's important that people, know that there's allies, especially artists. I mean, that's my audience. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are a number of reasons why someone puts it right in their bio, and even introduces themselves out in the world as, "Hi, I use these pronouns," because it's just like if someone says, just meets you and says, "Hi, Sam," and then the next minute they say, "Hey, Bertha," like it doesn't feel right. And so it's just the same feeling as if someone says, like, completely forgets your name, or doesn't even bother to learn your name. So it's that same idea of, don't assume my gender just from looking at me or hearing me. So yeah, it has many, many reasons that pronouns are important, and I've had to understand that from my own standpoint of not. I used to feel like I was putting people out. Like when I first started transitioning, I thought that it was inconvenient for people, and I didn't like to make life inconvenient for others. So I almost didn't honor my own what I needed. So it really is very complicated and deep rooted in some very important identification stuff. So
yeah, that's interesting. I think that kind of feeling is present, not just in that way, but with a lot of artists, where there's kind of almost like a guilt feeling for standing up for what you need and like being who you are.
yeah.
I think maybe that's the biggest struggle with artists, is like completely accepting, themselves totally for who they are, and then also being able to like articulate that in a way and like stand for that in a way.
Yeah. Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way talks about that, like how much codependency really takes away from the artist's creativity, because if you or exhausted from giving your chunks of yourself away, and not necessarily like, oh, you're always just giving, but really not even giving yourself time to do the art, not even giving yourself space to be inspired. Not, there's ways that we give ourselves, exhaust ourselves by caring about what others think and caring about what others do and comparing and all that. It's exhausting. When you're exhausted, you can't create,
Yeah.
so I really love that part of it, um, part of that book that is so inspiring. I
Yeah,
don't know anything about the artist way.
yeah. Actually, she co-authored a book called Money Drunk, Money Sober.
Oh,
And that one like completely shifted my concepts about money and totally really changed my financial life completely because I had, we grow up with all of these scripts about money,
mhm.
and we're not even really conscious of it. By the time we're adults, that's the vision that we have about money in the world.
Yeah,
And one of the exercises was like writing down some of the statements, the script from when we were children. And I just had this whole page of these limiting statements. And I didn't even realize it. It was like all of these things running through my mind, dictating my behavior around finances. There was guilt in there. There was ambition mixed with guilt, mixed with all of this stuff. That had become a part of my identity, and I really had to shed that in order to have more financial freedom and have like more consciousness about my money.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that's, and maybe this is common with ADHD because ADHDers tend to have, for me, I can speak for myself. Like I go around and I light fires, and then I circle back around and I go put the fires out. Um, and so, maybe the money thing is tied into that, but I just never really kept track of what I was spending and what I was earning.
Hmm.
Um, and for about 4 or 5 years now, I have an app that everything I spend, everything I earn goes into the app. It's really a simple app, and it just tracks all of that. And it's just incredible, like how much of a difference just that has made. Um,
Yeah, to
and
have it in black and white somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing about money is like it's there's so much emotion tied to it, with the way that we grow up and all of that, but it's ironic because it actually isn't emotional at all. It's very objective. It's just a number. So,
Right. It's like if the more we can see it objectively, the more we can wrap our heads around it and actually take control. But because it is emotional to us, because of the conditioning growing up about how our parents felt about money and how society, instills money values, it's all sorts of. I understand, and I have my own stuff around seeing my money in black and white. But I'm proud of myself for having a place where it's all budgeted. So
nice.
at least I'm there. But it's been
Nice.
a long road.
Yeah, there's also another thing I found with that is this guilt that was removed when I was putting it down in black and white. Um, Spending money on, coffee or like whatever kind of frivolous things that I was spending it on, the guilt was removed because I had it all there. And I also could like take money away from certain categories and put them into categories like self-care or I'm going to go to the sauna today, like all of these things that I kind of restricted myself from doing because I was so anxious about like, where the money was or if there was going to be enough there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Uh, so I have a couple questions. I switched up the questions that I usually ask because I think this one should be in the beginning. What's the worst trouble that you've ever been in? Most creatives get pretty burnt out and frustrated with all of the administrative tasks that go with being a professional artist. Taxes, accounting, client relations, shipping and handling. It just drains our energy and it takes away precious time for us to spend in the studio. That is a sigh of relief. I have good news for you. I've been working with a team of artists and other industry professionals to create a new kind of online learning platform and community for artists and students. This platform is designed to bring you a passive income, meaning that all you need to do is shoot the course and the money will roll in as long as the course is up on our page. There are a lot of other exciting innovations that we're going to work into this platform, which I do not have time to talk about now, but if you are interested in Sketcharium, go ahead and pop on over to Sketcharium.com. That's Sketch, ARIUM.com. Fill out the proposal form and we'll get back to you right away.
In regards to...
It's up to you how deep you want to dive into that one.
So you're asking a sober person, what's the worst trouble you've been in?
Yeah, I guess you should save that for a meeting or something.
Well, because it's like, do you... Talking in a meeting is different than, talking to a wider audience. But, I would say, I think it's pretty clear what the worst trouble was. And that is that when, it gets pretty dark, but it's when I lost my mother, and she died suddenly when I was 25. And I realized I needed to be sober after 6 months of just really dealing with that and not dealing with it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in the darkest place. And the trouble, there weren't a lot of things that I was necessarily, I was losing everything because I couldn't even see. I felt like the world was gray. Like I started to see the world through, I couldn't even see vivid color, how dark it was. So that was extremely troubling. Everyone around me could finally tell, because I was kind of white knuckling my life and saying, trying to keep it together so no one would notice. And it got so the trouble being that people started to notice because I couldn't hide it anymore. And I was starting to not hide it from myself too. So I would say that being in that the dark place where I really didn't have much meaning to my life was that wins for that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. My dad died when I was 16, and that actually, there was 4 more years of using and drinking and debauchery, and then I sobered up at 20. But yeah, I don't know if I would have, found recovery if it wasn't for that.
Yeah, I would say the silver lining with that horrible tragedy was that I probably wouldn't have gotten sober that early at all.
Yeah, that question is interesting. The answers vary from really dark to sometimes humorous to so it's interesting. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, sorry to hear that. My condolences.
Thank you. My condolences to you. And
Thanks.
it's nice to have those. There are lots of fun stories, but when I really think about the worst trouble, that's where I go, because what I'm dealing with every day is how I got to that point. I'm not romanticizing my old days of oh yeah, those days that I don't remember anymore because I was blacked out. So um, I I was like, should I be honest? Which is always where I land. I could use a filter sometimes.
No, I appreciate the honesty. So I guess the next question is actually what is the hardest thing you've struggled with? But I guess that was probably the hardest struggle that you've been through. But is there something that you continue to struggle with now that you kind of are gaining strength day by day as you move through it?
Yeah, I would say that my confidence as an artist is something that I continue to struggle with. Imposter syndrome is really a default for me, um, and it always has been with every endeavor that I
Mm,
go into. And I think it's something that I'm realizing that everybody's winging it. I'm realizing that everybody doesn't know what they're doing. I'm realizing that everybody has these feelings. And the only way I'm realizing it is that I did the same thing with my sobriety, that I started to do the same thing with my art that I did with my sobriety, which was to talk to people, like to
mm,
really, because the only way you're going to get someone validating your struggles is if you share your struggles. So, starting to talk about, well, why do I always feel like what I do isn't good enough? Why do I always feel like this client isn't going to like this? Why am I, why do I always feel this way? And knowing that a lot of people also feel that way has been really helpful for me.
yeah.
And I think just, as the years go on and doing this and just like on the client end of things, just kind of getting used to, okay, the client has decided to go another direction. It's not about you. Like just hearing that over and over and having it to do with the client and not your work is also something that has been helpful to me to just realize that it's the industry, it's not your work, you know.
Yeah, I think another part about that for me is being able to detach who I am from my work. I think I think that's at least the root of it for me is that when I'm able to do that, then um, yeah, it kind of loses its power. Like if someone rejects the work. I mean, I've been doing live caricatures for 7 years, so I mean that pretty much after 7 years of that, that kind of works that out because you have certain people who reject it, and you realize that it's not really about you because you know that was an awesome drawing, and
Mm-hmm.
they're rejecting it because of their own insecurities or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so so there's that disconnecting, like unlatching myself or who I am or my own self-worth from the actual work, and then also looking at it as a practice. Because we're all always going to be practicing, our whole lives as artists. We are always every work is a new piece of work. So um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that detachment is so important in so many facets of life. Just like I am I am not my work. My work is not me. So if I don't get a few clients, if I don't get clients for a little bit, it's not I am not devalued. It's really hard to do that when all you're doing as an artist is promoting yourself and as personal brands and marketing, and what's necessary to get your work out there is so muddled, and it's becoming so blurred. It's harder and harder to detach your work from yourself,
Mm.
but absolutely is necessary.
Yeah, and there's another thing that I've done, not necessarily in connection with my work, but I practice it in my client relations too. But um, I have a friend who we actually know each other from sobering up together, and he's, you know, one of the things about that in that community is, meeting people that you would just never meet otherwise or hang out with otherwise. And he's this, was this big commodities broker, kind of rich guy. And when we go out to lunch, he likes to go to like the 5 or 6 stars restaurants, and he invites everyone to come with him. And he's got this discount card, so we can get these like really super nice meals for super cheap. And
Mhm.
when you walk into the place, it's like swanky and fancy and gold trim everywhere, this like fancy restaurant. Our lunch place. And I went through this process with that because we would go out to lunch about once a week. I went through this process where I did not feel like I belonged, and I noticed that other people in the group wouldn't go just because they didn't like feel that their clothes were good enough or that they were worth it or whatever. So it took me a long time to start to get comfortable there, like maybe 50 times going there to where I really started to like loosen up a little bit more and feel more comfortable just going in like I deserve it, you know? And
Yeah.
so I guess my point is like if there's I want to encourage people like if they are feeling that like find some way to fake it until you make it. Like find some way because there's plenty of times where I stand up for my work or I stand up for myself where there's this like quicksand under that, you know? And I just have to like stand strong and like push through it because the courage is on the other side. Like the growth is on the other side of that fear and on the other side of that pain. Always. It's never like before it. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I really, I really think a big part of my process with that, and I encounter it all the time. I could tell you a million stories about when I felt that feeling. I mean, literally from, I wouldn't walk into certain boutiques with my ex-girlfriend because I just felt like I was below that boot, like in New York City, just I couldn't even walk in with her. And she's like, "What the, we have, like, I have the money to buy this thing, like, why aren't you walking in with me?"
yeah.
Um, but that I've had to talk this out with trusted friends. Like I am all about faking it until you make it. But while I'm faking it, I need to be like while I'm faking it over here, I need to be talking over here and over here and over here and like processing and talking to my therapist and like there's a lot of different bullet points to my getting on the other side of that because I deal with a lot of fear. I mean, it's just in my blood, so it sometimes I can look at myself and shame myself for needing so much help, but
Mm,
that's also instilled by our society. That's also a lie that is perpetuated in our society, and we're socialized to believe that we should do it all ourselves. And
mm.
I just think the opposite is true. I mean, the most successful people, I was just talking to friends last night, like Bill Gates didn't do it himself. There were a lot of people along the way. Every successful person, while they look like they're just this island, they really aren't. There's
Yeah,
no
we
in it
we
themselves.
see the glimmering stone atop the mountain of like work and like suffering and pushing through like we see
Yeah,
that tiny little shining piece at the top.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because Kate read something to me today. It was like it was a little bit not exactly on topic, but um, my point is that there's all these articles that like, oh, this person just decided to take pictures of their dog and put it on Instagram, and now they got 5 million followers and they have this successful business. I'm like, no, that is not how it worked. Trust me, I know that's not how it worked. So
well,
there's
that's what it
there's a
looks
good
like. But
say what?
that's what it looks like. But no, there's a lot of work behind that. We know.
Yeah.
We know as artists.
Um, so what are some of the principles or tactics or philosophy that you use to get through that anxiety or that you use to get through that self-doubt or that imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so it's usually starts with, well, identifying it, because a lot of times it'll be masked by some, like, oh, you haven't practiced enough, or um, you really need to learn. You need to learn this before you even try it, or you need to go back to school. Like it'll come in waves of just a lie, and then I'll identify it. So it's good to have that self-awareness or that practice of identifying. And then once I identify it, it's like it will depend on what I do next, and usually it is to talk it out, even. And sometimes it's like I need to I do have so I have these things that I can talk it out right then, but then I have these like weekly things where I set it up so I'm talking about my imposter syndrome, and that's my mastermind group that I have once a week. And I'll always, sometimes it'll be like I'm just feeling this general feeling of imposter syndrome with a certain project, or a general thing about just something I'm going through as an artist, usually around marketing and dealing with social media, which comes up a lot in our mastermind groups. And
Is
then
that with Andy, or you have that with another?
I have that with another group,
Okay, cool.
yeah, of artists that are, we're all around the globe, and it's really awesome. Um, and it's just a small group. I think mastermind groups should stay pretty small because it's hard enough to get schedules together, and it creates a sense of intimacy that, I mean, not a sense, it creates actual intimacy where you
Yeah.
can feel vulnerable with each other, and be honest with each other about what you're really going through. And then I have weekly therapy, and I have my other support groups. And I think just kind of setting that up to be like, I'm always able to share about these things. I'm always able to, it's not like necessarily holding myself accountable. It's just getting it out. And just, again, when I get it out, then sometimes it's not even about this, but it gets feedback that I'm not alone in that. I'm not unique in those feelings. And sometimes I'll make a phone call. Sometimes I'll chat with someone on Instagram. Sometimes I'll talk to my fiance. It just depends on how I'm going to get it out. And then the resolution to it is sometimes it takes a long time to resolve around that certain situation, and sometimes it's right then. I'm like, no, that's bullshit. Like, I'm just lying to myself. That's just my insecurity. And so it takes many forms. It's hard to kind of sum it up as to what the process is, but identification is definitely the most important one.
We're going to take a jar opening break. Have you heard of Drawsome.com? Of course you haven't, because it hasn't officially launched yet. But I have talked to Manny Avatisian, the founder, about it in detail. It's going to be Drawsome. The Drawsome app is an exciting new platform that's coming soon for artists and art lovers that's going to change the game. It's a creative social media marketplace where artists can post your artwork, receive commissions, and even turn each post into a print-on-demand product that's drop-shipped directly to your customers. That means people can choose if they want your design on a print, mug, t-shirt, whatever, and you don't have to deal with the printing or shipping. You want in on that, don't ya? Go ahead and hop over to Drawsome.com, that's DRAWSOME.com, and sign up to be the first to receive updates and news as soon as it's launched on iOS, Android, and web. Go sign up, Drawsome.com, and we'll keep you posted. My wife wants me to open a jar for her.
I couldn't get it open. Thank you.
You're so strong.
Service. I'm here to open jars for anyone. Come one, come all. Bring your jars. Yeah, I like what you said about particularly the thing about calling it out, or like calling it for what it is, because when we're in this dark room and something's making noise in the corner, in our minds it's really big and dangerous, and then when we shine the flashlight on it, it's just like this little mouse.
Mhm.
And this is something that's taught actually in Vipassana, like traditional mindfulness meditations. That's literally all that I did, a meditation retreat, and that's literally all I did for the whole 16 days was I sat there, and anytime something happened, I just named it for what it is, thinking, planning, regretting 3 times, you name it, every time.
Mhm.
And it starts to give you like a sense of, well, this is just that thing. That's all that really is. It kind of like, it allows you to detach from it and deal with it on like terms of objective reality. Because I know my mind, I have a great imagination. It's part of being an artist, so I can really twist things. I mean, that works in my favor, but it can also work to my disadvantage. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then definitely like talking about it. One thing that's been really kind of a joy in my sobriety is I'll have this plan, and I'll go to talk to somebody about it. And as soon as it comes out, I mean, it's like I see the absurdity of it. And, my friend or whoever I'm talking to is laughing already before I even finish my sentence. So it's good to get that stuff out of the head. It has a lot more weight in the head. And
Yeah.
another thing that I find when I'm journaling or getting this stuff on paper is that I can have three things that I need to get done or that are causing anxiety. And because of this echo effect in my mind, they become 10 or 20 things. And I'm thinking of all the little nuances on each thing, and they become 10 or 20 or 100 things. And then I write it down, and it's three things.
Mhm.
And I'm really struggling to find those other, 97 things, but they're not there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's been an important tool.
Yeah. It's like that black and white idea of just like sometimes just writing it down, it makes you see it for what it really is, which is not this cycle of spinning. It's not these spinning plates. It's actually just like three bullet points. And
Yeah.
it's, oh, this is much more manageable. But
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to say about my process is that my process has changed and it continues to change and it's always flexible to change. Like it could be that in the future I start to journal, like you were saying, and it could take the form of this, it could take the form of that. And I think as long as I stay open-minded to whatever works, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been repping lately, I should ask these guys to be a sponsor. I talk about them so much. It's this app Ike. Well, there's tons of different apps that do this, but what it is a priority matrix. So
Okay.
basically, you know about these?
Heard about the priority matrix, but I've never heard of an app that could do such magic.
It's magical. Yeah. It's basically there's four categories, and they split it up as important, not important, and urgent and not urgent. So in the upper left-hand corner, you have urgent and important. So that's the one you do now. And then you have urgent but not important, and that's the one that you delegate. And then you have not urgent. Wait, yeah, you have not important but urgent, and that's something, or not urgent but important, that's something you plan. So all four quadrants have like their own like different type of priority, and
Right.
there's a particular action that you take for whatever priority level, like whatever box it fits into. Um, and that I've been using that. That's like an anxiety reliever big time because, I have four different projects that I'm working on, including like, personal stuff. So it has like, a section priority matrix for all those different areas of life. And when I get an idea, if I get really excited about it, I'll write it down and fit it into that matrix, and then I just can forget about it and like move on with like what's in the do now box.
Oh,
So.
nice. And does anything move from one box to the other?
You can move it from one box to the other. Yeah, and you can schedule a time with an alarm,
Mm.
like when you want to get it done. So, yeah, that's the thing about getting stuff done is like making a list. I guess I'm getting into ADHD territory here, but making a list is like not recommended for ADHD people unless the list has, a time limit, how long you think it's going to take, what day you want to do it on, basically, unless you work it into your schedule.
Right. Yeah, and then I think tools for sober people, tools for people with anxiety, tools for people with ADHD, they can be utilized by people in other groups.
Yeah.
So I really think that while I am not diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, oh yeah, I always like lose attention sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm just like you. But anxiety that I do suffer from can cause some ADHD behavior that has actually muddled my diagnoses sometimes. But so anxiety can cause so much, reeling, that it's very hard to focus, very hard to prioritize. And I do have trouble with lists, even though I have the OCD kind of anxiety. It doesn't make much sense with how much I love organization that I can't seem to find a to-do list system that works for me. Because it's just like I'm just constantly. I remember when my anxiety was really high, I was an office manager, and there were just so many things to do. I would just keep rewriting the list. I was hardly getting anything done, but I was really good at making lists.
It was like therapeutic just to write the list down.
It was like, oh my, okay, I'm overwhelmed. This is all
All work, no play.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So, I mean, prioritization is hard for a lot of people, and to-do lists are. It's a hard one to find what works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you'd probably really like the priority matrix. Another thing that I use is that a friend of mine, shout out to Chance McGee Kunst. He's a buddy of mine who lives in Dresden, and we call each other once a week, and we do like a list of. We do it. We give each other a list, and then we call each other at the end of the week and say, "All right, how did it go?" And I've learned so much. I mean, we've been doing it maybe only for 5 weeks now or something, but it's just really enlightening. Um, One thing that I've learned is that lists have to be flexible, because things move around so much, especially when it relies on other people. Um, but yeah, an accountability buddy, someone like you said, we have to lean on each other. Especially, the thing about freelance work is that I've kind of came to the realization the other day was even normal people that have normal brains go to work and they have this structure there and they can just go to work, do the thing, and then leave and leave that there and then like do the other thing, like live their life. But we have this like double issue here because like not only do we not have that structure, but then usually artists or a lot of artists have some kind of neurodiversity or like anxiety or like other kind of thing going on to where like structure is even more important. So it's for me it's been super important to have that accountability buddy and create my own structure, and try and stick to that as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a couple things that came up for me when you said that. But I think I started to convince myself when I was isolated and alone, teaching myself, and well, YouTube taught me. It's Mr. YouTube. Um, no, a lot of generous artists on YouTube that gave away their knowledge taught me. Anyway, um, the most important the thing that I convinced myself when I was alone was that the only artists that were successful were not the neurodivergent ones. They were the ones who were just that had a really great upbringing and they were just killing it, and they were organized, and they were outgoing and bubbly, and they just had everything going for them, and they didn't struggle a lot, with their inside of their brains, and they didn't struggle a lot in their lives. And those are the only ones that were going to be successful now that social media was the new marketing tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I have since changed my mind about that. Meeting more artists, and knowing that that's not true. And it might be true for some people, but you don't know what they're going through. And it doesn't matter. Like, if I like, again, that iceberg effect of like you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. I happen to be following all these people in the industry. It looks this like everyone is this way because I'm following a bunch of people in the same industry. That's not everyone in the world, and they don't represent everybody. and I'm comparing myself to this idea and an idea that I'm making up in my head, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you said that actually, because that's something that only recently have I started to question or not realize was a fallacy. This concept of like comparing our insides with other people's outsides. It's like we're comparing the inner core of how we feel and our inner like self-worth to this like onion skin of what people show the world. And it's
Yeah.
completely, it's like comparing apples to, spaceships or something. It's like totally not the same thing. So yeah, I'm glad that you said that. That is an important thing to realize is that, you know, some people do have an advantage and some people are successful as artists, and that has led to them being, um, having more opportunities or whatever. But that's definitely, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's definitely not true. I've met a lot of well-known artists and successful people that part of their success was the fact that they had to go through all that pain and diversity.
Yeah.
So we'll take one quick short break and we'll be right back for some more interesting questions. Hey, thanks for watching Famous When I'm Dead podcast. This episode and all future episodes are going to be available on any one of your favorite podcast apps. I'll also be making all of my interviews from last year available as we move forward. This podcast is free for you to listen to, but it is not free for me to produce. Currently, it's about $140 a month to produce this podcast, if and I hope I can keep my video editor. So I want to give a shout out to the patrons, Tom Lambert and Lynn Davis at the $10 level, Chance McGee at the $5 level. You can find him on Instagram at Chance McGee Kunst. Also, Darren Kennedy and Joan Fleming at the $2 level. You can find Darren Kennedy at DK Delicious on Instagram. Love that name. And you can find Joan Fleming on Instagram at Caricatures by Joni Fleming. If you are still listening at this point, chances are that you do get value out of this podcast. If you are able to and you want to show us some love, be sure to pop over to our Patreon page. It's Patreon, patreon.com/famous when I'm dead. The link will be in the description below. If you're strapped for cash and you still want to show us some love and support, make sure that you share the podcast with friends, family. Maybe you have students that might be interested in hearing the stories of these professional artists. Thanks for watching, and be sure to leave us a thumbs up and a comment below. Why don't we talk about your work a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you.
So did you start... What'd you say?
Try.
You're like... So, yeah, can you say it again? My microphone cut out. So how did you get started with it? Did you start with lettering and then you got into the 3D thing, or?
Yeah, I started with calligraphy. Well, I started in graphic design way back, 2011. And I was like, I think I'd like this. I think I'd like lettering because I was following Sean West and following along with how to run your business. And he just kept talking about this lettering thing. And I'm just like, what is this lettering thing? And I just started doing that. I took his class and I started to do some hand lettering, and I took a tiny part of his class was about brush calligraphy, and I was so bad at it and so frustrated with it that I was like, I will conquer this. And so I took a couple Skillshare classes and watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I conquered it to the point where I was happy with it, and I posted my hand lettering and my calligraphy to Instagram. I had a lot of positive feedback, so that was helpful to kind of have that motivational loop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I'm going to practice. I'm going to show my practice. I'm going to show my improvement, my progress. And I'm also going to, I'm really big on learning and improving myself. So I was really motivated by that. And it was around that time that I started to get into 3D. I was doing rendering for commercials, sets for, and I was just using SketchUp, which is just nothing like anything I'm doing today. But um, I was like, I started to see some art where there was lettering in the 3D space.
Mm-hmm.
There were very few and far between, but I was so inspired by those images, and it was. I was like, maybe I could combine those things, and so I started to learn Cinema 4D, and I started to combine them in myself, and I really got into learning more about 3D, and I fell in love with it. And it got really technical really fast, but I was just so, and I don't really love, I don't like learning about computers. I don't really like learning the techie stuff. I just want to make art and I want to make it easily. I just
Yeah.
love it if I could just like do this and the 3D was done. But I loved the end product so much that I learned it all and was really motivated to learn that. And
Yeah.
so I had a lynda.com and a Skillshare membership, and I just in Grayscale Gorilla, I was following their tutorials, and I just absorbed information wherever I could.
Hmm.
And then I started getting some actual jobs from it. Like I would say a year and a half into really putting that stuff out there.
Do you animate it too then, yeah?
Sometimes I'll animate it, but I'm getting more into animation now. But at first it was completely still images.
So you're doing this mainly for clients and then for your own work. Do you like what other ways are you generating revenue from it?
They're just client work.
Just client
I
work?
should
Okay.
be, generating other revenue, and I sell posters on my website, but I need to be a lot better about physical products and other ways that I can generate revenue.
I was talking to Peter Moorbacher, who's like a concept artist. He's the author of Angelarium, and he talked about like this like different levels of that each piece is like run through. Like he makes the piece, then he posts it on Instagram, and then he makes it available. Like he puts it into his book, and then he makes the print available. And then, if it's for a client, the client gets it. So like one piece, he gets like as much mileage and juice out of one piece. And I
So
just,
smart.
it,
So
it's
smart.
it seems so simple, right? But it's like when I heard it, I'm like, oh man, that's really important. Like, and then I started thinking, man, I could just one piece. I could do this. So yeah, he's created kind of like this pipeline for himself, which I think is just great advice for any freelancer.
Yeah,
Um,
because we
yeah,
put so much work into that one piece.
yeah.
Now, sometimes I'll take forever to just put something on my portfolio, like that I've done. It's again about that anxiety and perfectionism, and I know that, but it's like how you're leaving money on the table. I mean, when you're not even showing the work that you've done, and here's this guy who is really getting everything out of that piece that he possibly can. That's really where I want to get
I
is.
think I think it's not as complicated as we think. I think that it's
Right,
just basically, we just have to get a rhythm, like
right.
okay, step one, step two, step three, whatever.
Yeah.
And you could even use like your making process of doing that on Instagram, and people like to see the process too.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, oh, man, there's so many questions and other stuff that's been bubbling in my head that I want to talk to you about, but we're like coming to the end of our interview. We'll have to do it again. I
Yeah.
wanted to do a visualization exercise, and I also have like five other questions for you, but um, so let's get to rapid fire questions. Are you
Uh,
ready for this?
I don't know.
Okay.
Gotta get ready.
I don't think that any of them are too pressing. I think the worst trouble is probably the hardest question. Okay. Rapid fire question number one. Stand-up or skit comedy?
I guess skit.
Okay.
It's hard to
What
choose.
is your favorite skit? Do you have a favorite one?
Favorite skit.
Like
Actually, yeah, it's Bob Newhart on Mad TV saying, "Just stop it."
oh my God, I have to look that up. You know,
Stop.
I realized Key and Peele actually were on Mad TV, and I didn't even realize that till I went and watched an old clip.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it all got started, man.
Mhm.
Okay, my favorite skit is Weekend Update, the current Weekend Update. I love the.
Like recurring skit. Okay. All
Oh
right.
well, it could be any other skit. It's fine.
It's really good. Yeah, Michael Chang and Colin Jost are very good.
Yeah. And your last meal.
A burrito, breakfast burrito.
Yeah. All right. Nice. Are you reading any books now, or what kind of literature are you into now?
I'm going back through the artist's way.
Nice.
Something
Okay.
I to go back through every once in a while.
Favorite new band or musician?
The favoriteest, newest band is Tame Impala. I know I'm really late to the game there, but that's like one that really sticks out.
I think everyone's late to every musical game now because it used to be a band was popular for 10 years and now they're popular for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I was really late to Arcade Fire, actually. When I found Arcade Fire, I was like, man, these guys are really good. And I'm telling everybody about it, and they're like, yeah, where were you 10 years ago?
Did you hear about this band?
They're this indie band. Actually, they came to Prague and performed in this tiny little, like, before the major show, they came and he did a DJ set, like, in this tiny little place, this little college basement. Well, there was like 30 people. So we all hung out and danced while he did this set. And then the next night I went to the show and there's, 40,000 people. I'm like, yeah, I was hanging out with him last night. It's really cool.
Cool.
Okay, you have an opportunity to plug your brain into the internet and instantly access all the world's information at any moment. Do you plug in or stay unplugged?
Plug in.
Yeah.
I mean, who
Well,
cares about mental health? No,
well, you
but
might have that opportunity this year or, in the next 10 years.
yeah, that would be hard because it's already hard to plug into social media, and you have to really balance that. But it would be something I'd probably think twice about, but I'd be very motivated to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's on the horizon. We might see it in our lifetimes, very likely.
Yeah,
Okay. You're trapped on an island and you can bring one object. What is it?
I think my iPad.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I'm gonna
Yeah.
skip the next one. It's too long of a question. Okay, the one after that. Okay, okay. You stand at the precipice, overlooking a treacherous terrain of the creative journey. It's dark, jagged, and mysterious. Behind you stand a whole generation of creatives. You have 30 seconds to distill the best advice before they begin their quest. What do you tell them?
Ask for help.
Don't do it. Get a job.
Yes, that's first what I would say, and then I'd be like, "JK, JK, just ask for help."
Constantly ask for help. Yeah, that's really important. And last one, you have 1 week to live. How do you spend it?
Ugh, I've thought about this, and I really don't know. Um, I think the regular, what everyone says is I would try to spend it with loved ones, and that's true. Like I would probably try to fit as many of the people that I love in that week as possible.
Mm-hmm. We have time for the question that I left out. So you have $1 billion. All of your financial needs are met. You don't have to do anything, but you have this huge pile of cash. What do you do with that?
I probably ask many experts about the best way to make the biggest difference in the world because I wouldn't necessarily think that I had the answer to what that would be. There are a lot of smarter people about, wealth allocation than me. So
Yeah.
I think That's what I would do. Hey, I went for ask for help. I would ask for help.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very humble answer. Yeah. I think about
My
that
needs are met,
often.
so like
You what?
my needs are met. So like, what else can you do?
Yeah. That's why I always think it's funny when people are like, Bill Gates, he's out to like screw everybody. I'm like, dude, you have no, he has no, why? There's no
We
reason.
need so many more Bill Gates out there. Like
Yeah.
we, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just jealous.
I think about it sometimes because that's kind of like a thought experiment or kind of like I ask myself that question and my answer is the same. I would spend the rest of my life like investing in projects that make a difference and make the world a better place. Um, but I also the answer to it is also like, why do I need $1 billion to do that? Like maybe I can't invest money, but I can invest myself and my time in other ways to make the world a better place. And I can spend most of my time doing that. And I can like gear all of my practices in that direction. Like, how am I being of service? How is this helping the next generation? How is this helping this group of people? How am I like giving being of maximum service, to the people around me and the artists and. So yeah, the answer is you don't really need $1 billion to do that.
But $1 billion really helps. The wealth distribution is really messed up in the world. And money, like money, would help so many issues that just need a little bit, whereas this over here has all of it. It's really messed up. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's aside from the plugging in question and the neural link thing, I think that is my biggest concern, especially after Corona, because it's like very clear that everything is being kind of sucked out of the middle class, especially artists, like
yeah.
I think that they say like $10 billion a year is being kind of sucked out of middle class artists and into the Instagrams and the other huge corporations. So we'll see what happens. I wonder if it's going to crumble.
Hopefully in some ways. Yes.
That should help with the anxiety. It's all going to crumble. So how can how can people find you?
At Noah Camp Design on Instagram and noahcampdesign.com or noahcamp.com. I have both. I'm switching. And yeah, that's where you'll mostly find me.
Are you open for client work?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. The great Noah Camp, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching Famous When I'm Dead podcast. This episode and all future episodes are going to be available on any one of your favorite podcast apps. I'll also be making all of my interviews from last year available as we move forward. This podcast is free for you to listen to, but it is not free for me to produce. Currently, it's about $140 a month to produce this podcast, if and I hope I can keep my video editor. So I want to give a shout out to the patrons, Tom Lambert and Len Davis at the $10 level, Chance McGee at the $5 level. You can find him on Instagram at Chance McGee Kunst. Also, Darren Kennedy and Joan Fleming at the $2 level. You can find Darren Kennedy at DK Delicious on Instagram. Love that name. And you can find Joan Fleming on Instagram at Caricatures by Joni Fleming. If you are still listening at this point, chances are that you do get value out of this podcast. If you are able to and you want to show us some love, be sure to pop over to our Patreon page. It's Patreon, patreon.com/famous when I'm dead. The link will be in the description below. If you're strapped for cash and you still want to show us some love and support, make sure that you share the podcast with friends, family. Maybe you have students that might be interested in hearing the stories of these professional artists. Thanks for watching, and be sure to leave us a thumbs up and a comment below.